Hello friends, this is Marilyn from Hillview Farms where country runs deep. Today I'm going to be putting up purple butter beans. So grab you a cup of coffee, sit back and keep me company. Be sure to stick around to the ending for a very unexpected plot twist. And I do want to go ahead and say right off the bat that I did not purchase these butter beans from any of our local produce farms. These were brought to me by a family friend who picked them up when she picked hers up in another county a couple of hours from here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a portion of this bag at a time. I like to put up one pot at a time. I don't want to feel overwhelmed. So I poured out just enough for maybe one pot, and I'm going to rinse. As you can see, they definitely need to be rinsed before you put them up. You see how dirty my water is already. So I like to rinse them really good in a sink full of water, and then I'll start looking through them. And when I'm looking through them, I'm looking for any that are too dark. And I'm also looking for any debris, like pieces of leaves from the butterbean bushes that may have accidentally, like that one, that may have accidentally ended up in the bag of beans. I cheated a little because I bought my butter beans from a commercial farm, and they were already picked and shelled and bagged up in these vacuum packed bags. This is a bushel of butter beans. This is how much you end up with when you buy a bushel of butter beans. I also like to do a second wash, just so I can tell by the clearness of my water that I've gotten these beans clean. And this is where I kind of go through the selection process. My family does not really prefer the really dark butter beans. These are called speckled or purple butter beans, but actually once they reach this speckled phase, let me get one, and the purple phase there, they're really not as good. They have a tendency to taste more like a dry butter bean, and I actually don't prefer those. We like the smaller butter beans. Like, this is more of a perfect size. That has the best butter bean flavor, and it's going to give you that wonderful purple liquid. My grandma would call that pot liquor. But it's just a wonderful purple liquid that makes the beans so flavorful. Makes them also be very delicious to pour over a homemade biscuit. Now the reason why you end up with a lot of these larger speckled beans when you buy them from a farm business or a produce company is because a lot of times they will just let all the beans they're said to be full once they reach maturity. They come in pods. Butter beans come in pods, usually 2 to 3 butter beans in each of the pods. And once they're full, you can fill the butter bean inside the pod. So a lot of places will just let all the beans on the bush become full at one time so that they can harvest them at one time. And when that happens, you end up with some of the really overgrown ones as far as I'm concerned. See, these big ones, purple ones, you end up with a lot of those in your bag. And that's why I'm taking time to be a little extra selective. It's because to me, it honestly changes the flavor of the pot of beans. So I am taking up a little bit of time. I know I'm putting a lot of work on myself to go through them, but I promise you, they're not going to be wasted. My chickens will eat them, and it makes all the difference in the world to me. Now, when I was growing up, we didn't have the problem of the butter beans being too full. And that's because my mama worked her butt off in her garden. She was proud of her garden. She kept it neat and hoed, and she planted a lot. She had a really big garden. And she would pick over her butter beans. Once they started filling, she would go through and just pick the ones that were starting to get full before they got too full. And those are the ones we would shell and cook and put up. And that way she was able to pick over those beans several times and get several batches of beans for us to put in the freezer. And I tell you, there was nothing like some good old fresh butter beans on a cold winter's day. When I was really young, we had our garden over at my grandmother's house because they had a big garden in the back. So back then, Mama would just go in with them and they'd all plant a big garden together, her and my aunt and my grandmother. And when it was time to shell butter beans, they would rinse them off really good, spread them out on a picnic table in the holes. And each of us would get a big old wash tub pan. Those big round white metal pans full of butter beans. And we would all sit in a circle out in Grandma's backyard under the shade of her pecan trees and just have a good old time with each other while we shelled butter beans. And you better believe I love staying up under the older people. Those old, my mama and aunt, I love sitting up under them because I love to hear them talk. I wanted to know everything that was going on, and so I was always interested to sit there and listen to the adults talk while we shelled butter beans. I like to give them a good rinse, just for good measure. So I run water over them 2 or 3 times and pour it back out through the strainer, just to make sure we got all the little pieces of leaves out. And we certainly don't want any grit left in there. I think this should do it. Okay, so I've got the first pot done, and I'm just going to fill it with water to about 1 inch above the surface of the beans. So now I'm going to blanch the beans. This takes a lot longer than it does with corn, because with corn you're just submerging the corn cobs in the boiling water for about 5 minutes. But with butter beans, you're actually filling a pot with cold water, and you've got to bring it up to a boil and then let it boil for about 5 minutes. Again, we don't want to cook the beans, but we do want them to be sterilized. So as the butter beans heat up, they will start releasing that purple color into the liquid. Looks like another thunderstorm's blowing up. Y'all know how I like to porch sit during a thunderstorm. Wow, the wind's really picking up too. I'm going to turn you around so you can porch sit with me and watch the thunderstorm. I've got the pot of beans boiling. Putting up butter beans is really a time-consuming process. Even though I had already purchased them, picked and shelled and pretty much washed, it still takes a long time to actually go through luking them to the extent that I do, because I want to make sure there's no leaves in them, and I want to make sure there's no dirt or grit in them. And like I showed you before, I like to pick out those really big speckled ones because they're just not as good. So it takes a long time, and we're sitting here waiting for the pot to boil, enjoying this thunderstorm. But once that batch reaches boiling, and I let it boil for about 10 minutes, then I need to let them cool off before I bag them up. So I'm going to pour them out in some shallow pans and just let them sit for at least 30 minutes or more. So it's really a lot of waiting in this procedure. So I'm going to let them sit and cool for a while, and then when I feel like they're cool enough that I can handle well, I'm going to put them in bags. Okay, so they're starting to boil. Give them a little stir. I don't want to stir them too much because I don't want the bean hulls to fall off. Now when I got older and my grandparents had gotten older, they no longer had a garden over at their house. So Mama started planting her garden at our house. And my daddy was a farmer, so we had lots of acres of land behind our house. So when I say she planted a garden, I mean she planted a field. And she worked in that thing every day, hoeing it, tending it, weeding it, until it was time for those butter beans to come off. And she planted lots of other things too, but the butter beans were our favorite. And she would go out there and pick an enormous amount of butter beans and then bring them into the house. And we would help her sometimes also, me and my sisters. But she would bring those in the house and wash them off, because you want to make sure there was no dirt on the outside the hull. and then spread them out on the kitchen counter. And each of us would get a big bowl, and we would fill them with beans, and we would grab a Pepsi or a snack, and we would head over to the couch and a recliner, and we would turn on our soaps. Back then we loved Days of Our Lives, Another World, and Santa Barbara. And we were all teenagers. And we would sit all afternoon and just sit and talk and watch our soap operas and get those beans shelled. And if you finished your pot, I mean, you go dump them in the sink with the beans that Mama had already shelled, and you fill your pot again until that kitchen counter was empty. So it took us quite a while, even with four of us shelling. It would take us a while to shell all those beans that Mama had picked just that afternoon. So this usually happened after we had already spent the morning suckering tobacco. So, you know, Mama's had a full day. So we had to get all those butter beans shelled and out of the way so that Mama could cook supper. Because we always, every night, had a home-cooked supper. And without a doubt, some of those freshly shelled butter beans were going to be on our plates that night. I do have a funny memory. One of my sister's boyfriend was eating with us once, and we had purple butter beans for that meal. And he was eating them, and she asked him, "Do you like them?" And he said, "They're okay. I'm mostly just swallowing them whole." She made him rake those off his plate and told him not to eat those anymore. They were too much work to put up for somebody who didn't even like them. That was hilarious. But at least she knew the value of the hard work that was put into it, because she had to put in that work. So it makes you appreciate it a lot more when you're the one that has to do the work to put them up. That smells so good. So I went in the house to start looking through the second batch of my butter beans. And as I was rinsing them and going through and picking out the big beans, I found something that didn't feel right, and it had a leaf wrapped around it. So I started pulling it apart. At first I thought it might have been a morning glory, just, you know, one of those flowers that had accidentally gotten in there. But then as I started unwrapping the leaf around it, I found this. So this little froggy was in my beans. That's a first. He's all squished, soggy. So what would you do? I've got a bag of beans, vacuum packed beans that have been marinating along with this soggy, squished little frog. But this is a first for me, so I'll get back with you. And it is soft and flat and squished and soggy. So it has been marinating in that bag of beans for a while. So I think my chickens are gonna get the whole bag of beans, which means I can't finish my video. Sorry, folks. I was so looking forward to my purple butter beans and having them put in the freezer for the winter. So I guess I could get another bushel. I don't know though. I might be turned off on them. Ooh. That was 2 hummingbirds that just flew between that pole and my feet, fighting each other. That's crazy. Anyway, I may be turned off of butter beans right now for just a little while. Maybe I'll get over it before the season's over and I can get another bushel. And if I do, I will do another video. So until next time.